Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back. This is So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
And I'm Eliot.
Thanks for joining us. We're really glad you're here. And before we jump in, is there anything else we want to tell them?
No. Oh, wait. Yeah. I'm going to use my announcer voice.
See, I knew it. Oh, you're going to use your announcer voice.
Yes, I am.
Dun, dun,
okay. Dun. Remember, we're not just on iTunes or wherever you happen to be listening to this podcast. You can find us online at sohere'smystory.com for show notes, links, and any random references that we think are somehow relevant.
That last part's actually the most important part because I guarantee you we will reference really obscure random things and probably not be able to remember the name of them. So if we do that, that's where you can actually find the information on how to find those things if they seem useful.
Absolutely. Thank God for show notes.
Okay, so now can we get started?
We can.
Okay. So I know that our agreement, like the deal, the design, is that each time we both come with a story and one of us decides to tell it. But ever since we recorded that last episode, I'm dying to hear your parking ticket story and how you make that relevant. So I'm going to insist that you tell your story today.
Great. Then here we go. I know I said I'd get to my story, but there is one last thing I have to say, and that is I might have messed up just a little bit on the tech side.
Yeah. So we're going to launch right in here to the content that we recorded for episode 2. Turns out we must have hit a button wrong or something because it's a little fuzzy, but I think you can still hear it, and we really liked it, and we thought about ditching it, and then we decided, hey, we're the ones who say business is messy, so I guess our podcast can be a little messy too.
Okay, so here's my story, and it goes back a little ways.
I feel like I should have like nostalgia music.
Yeah, it is from the Wayback Machine. But so it was, I think it was around 1996, wow. To be exact, I know. My pride and joy was my 2-door black Honda Prelude.
Nice.
And I parked it in front of the circuit court for Anne Arundel County in Annapolis, Maryland, because I was running late for a hearing, and I parked it on the street, and I had a meter there, and I went in and I did what I had to do, and I came out, and there was a ticket. And the ticket was for the princely sum of $50. And I figured, okay, well, fine, I'll pay the ticket. But when I looked more closely at the ticket, it said that I can't pay in cash, and they don't take checks, and they don't take credit cards. They only accepted money orders.
Beads?
Yeah. Or trade.
Indentured servitude.
So they only took money orders. And I thought, and this is even back in 1996, I'm like, money orders? Yeah. When's the last time you got a money order?
Yeah.
So anyway, I meant to...
what my first response was? I was like, I would have to Google where to go to get a money order, but you couldn't have done that.
You couldn't Google.
It's not on your phone
then.
Anyway.
That's right. Yeah. So I meant to pay it. I really did. I meant to pay it. But I didn't pay it. And so the next month, I got a letter from the city of Annapolis telling me that I owed $50 and with the same instructions. And 2 things occurred to me. Number 1, they didn't add interest or penalties. So it was still the same $50. And number 2, they still would only accept money orders. And so yet again, I meant to pay it, but I did not. And so I won't belabor this point too much, except to say that they kept sending me these notices monthly. And at some point, my intention transformed from wanting to pay it to wanting to see how long this would continue. It became a test of wills.
Question, were they charging you interest at all?
No.
So never. So it's not like a brilliant ploy to get huge penalties from people.
No.
Making it hard to pay. Oh, okay.
No, they were not. There was no penalty for not paying it. And there was an obstacle to paying it.
Right. So somebody loves administrative work. Like, how can we make this as administratively complex as possible?
Well, that's my point.
Redundant.
That's exactly my point. So this went on for 5 years.
No.
It did.
You let it go 5 years?
I let it go. Not only did I let it go 5 years, I no longer had the car. And I had purchased the car through a company that I had started. I don't know why, but it seemed like a good idea at the time. So I no longer even had the company that owned the car. And so it went on for 5 years, and then it stopped. And then 6 months later, I would get one notice from the city of Annapolis, $50, money order. And then it stopped. Well, my wife and I moved to Pennsylvania in 2005, and we got a notice soon after we moved from the city of Annapolis, $50, money order. And then that was the last I heard of them, was in 2005. So that was 19 years that it went on. And I did calculate that they had long since dwarfed the amount that I owed them.
Oh, sure.
By postage. And so
paper and hassle.
And so this has really coalesced into what I refer to as rule number one. And everybody in my office knows rule number one. And rule number one is make it easy for people to do what you want them to do. Yeah. And the city of Annapolis, obviously, they wanted me to pay them. And yet they made it so hard for me to do that they never got what they want. All they had to do was just figure out what's the easiest way? What would make it so simple for this person to do what we want them to do? A couple more years, by the time they sent their last notice, they could have offered payment online. They could have done credit card. They could have taken a credit card over the phone. They could have let me write a check.
Yeah.
There could even be an office where I could go in and pay cash, but they didn't list that. So anyway, it was the violation of rule number one, and to me it still stands as the clearest violation of rule number one that I've ever seen.
Well, yeah, and actually what occurred to me, I'm not a big fan of, because I started to say, or if they even would have disincentivized not paying, the fact that when I get a speeding ticket or some sort of parking ticket or something and I forget to pay it, the next month it goes from $30 to $50 or $60. I'm like, and I run and pay it. But I pause there because I'm not usually a huge fan of like carrot and stick kind of motivation for people, because it's very short-term useful. But as I had that thought, what occurred to me was they actually were using, like, they had reversed the carrot and the stick, which is really what you're hitting at here. Like, they were using a stick on the side of what they wanted you to do, which is, let's make it really hard. And then the incentive was nothing happens if I don't.
Right. It kind of reminded me of, I had a client who had terms and conditions. They asked me to look over terms and conditions. And one of their terms was that if you don't pay us when the balance is due, interest will accrue. But the interest that they put on their form, and I don't know whether they cut and pasted this from a form in the 30s, but the interest was 2% per annum. Maybe they meant 2% per month, but it was 2% per annum. And I had to sit there and I had to say, what you've said is to your customers, if you don't pay me when it's due, I'm going to give you a loan well below prime rate.
Exactly.
Right. So that's right. I mean, I do believe, as a lawyer, I have to believe in the stick as well as the carrot,
sure.
The interest and things. But it was just stunning that so many businesses don't figure out what they want and then make it as easy as possible for somebody to do that.
Well, and we're talking about the external versions of those things, which for sure is useful. What do you want your customers to do? But I really see it in some of the work I end up doing internally in companies. And I end up thinking of it often as like the unintended consequences that no one ever really thinks through all the way. But this is a much simpler way to think of it. And then how that affects culture. I was doing a huge culture project for a Fortune 125 company, and they really wanted me to stay focused just on culture. But as I was interviewing all these different people, all these operational things kept coming up that cannibalized culture more than any poster of our great values could ever recover. And just one quick example was, they had an engineering department and then a sales department for what they did, which is pretty typical. And as is also typical, sales was incentivized heavily. I mean, an enormous part of their compensation was based on commission, which is not unusual. And it was incentivized, as is typical, on how many deals do you close? And that was on a monthly or quarterly basis. There was a deadline. How many boxes can I check off? Engineering, who was responsible for delivering the things that these people sold, and therefore that had to happen before you would get your commission, was incentivized almost exclusively on not making any mistakes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can hear the car crash
Absolutely.
of priorities. So sales is going, hurry, hurry, hurry. It's the end of the month. Hurry. And engineering's like, no, thank you. I'm going to make sure it's perfect. In fact, I don't care when it's done. I only care that it's absolutely perfect.
Wow.
Well, the double wow for me was because when I encountered this in I interviewed hundreds of people and I kept hearing these kinds of things. So I thought, oh my gosh, I have cracked this like Indiana Jones code of what is getting in the way of culture. And fascinatingly, I got blank stares and from some of the leadership that said, well, that's nice. Could you please just focus on culture? We don't really want to look at operations in this project. We just want to look at culture.
That's kind of a lipstick on a pig problem.
Totally. Well, but the thing is, I understand because I do empathize. Like I use those examples not in any kind of mockery because I can always see through to ways that I do similar kinds of things because for them, tackling it just seemed so enormous. Like they were more present to the some of the culture issues. But, they're like, oh, that would entail so many fixes. Let's not deal with that.
Well, but I guess my question then is, well, what did culture mean to them?
Yeah.
What was it, and maybe you don't know, but what was it that they were really looking to accomplish by the time you walked out the door for the final time?
Yeah, well, then that's a whole other conversation. Culture is such a funny thing with so many rabbit holes and so many misleading pieces to it. But the piece that was most clear to me was the underestimation of how important this thing that you're pointing to is. That if you make it really easy for people to do the thing you want them to, some people still won't do it. You can put recycling cans right next to the trash can, and some people will still throw all their stuff in the trash can. That's a best case scenario. So if you make it hard, if you only put one recycling can in the entire place, and it's 7 offices down on the left, I can guarantee you no one's going to do that. So the make it easy part is the first hurdle. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of other just weird people quirk hurdles.
But one of the things, it was funny because this just happened yesterday. I sat down with somebody at Pete's Coffee, and we finished up with our coffee. We were leaving, and it was funny because I could almost step outside myself and watch the two of us. We both approached the trash can. And it just occurred to me when you said recycling. So they had 2 canisters next to each other. One was clearly recycling. One was clearly trash. But on the recycling, they printed or they had some sort of representation of all of the different types of containers that should go in the recycling. And we both just stopped there like we were reading some sort of treatise. And we were trying to compare what we were each holding with what this diagram was. And both of us, I think at the exact same time, made the exact same decision. Screw it. And we just threw our containers in the trash. Yeah. Because while they made it convenient, they did not make it easy.
Yeah. No, this is so in the whole world of environmental projects in companies, that's actually a huge issue is that, there's a bunch of different cans or you just don't know which thing goes in where. And the confused mind says, no, if it's not easy, like convenient is one piece of it, but then simple and clear. If people don't know, they'll just be like, forget it. And they'll throw it in one or the other. Or I've actually taken things with me sometimes because in a place I didn't want to be judged for throwing it in the
somewhere
wrong
else.
line. Yeah, I'll delay the decision. I'll figure it out later. I'll just throw it in my bag and sort it out later. Not only is it about making it easy for people, but I think it's getting over those hurdles of why they aren't doing it. So I think a lot about where I am doing that in my own business and where do I make it hard for people to do what I want them to do? And ironically, this is the funny thing about simplicity, is I think sometimes we can actually, in an effort to make things easier, we then make them harder. So I went through a phase where I was trying to simplify the way I bill and the structures. I was trying to put in more structure so that, instead of having 20 different ways, I can, being like a Denny's menu, here's the 17-page menu of how we can work together. I was trying to have it like a simple little ordering list kind of thing. And the more I did that, the harder it was to get a yes. And I was sort of confused. And then one of my clients very graciously put me out of my misery one day and said, what works is that you don't have some perfect structure and you say to somebody, well, what would be easy? What feels right for you? And then you do that thing. And so if it's not a hassle for you, just keep doing it the way you were doing it. And I was like, oh.
Well, it reminds me of, the famous story of when Steve Jobs was given his walking papers at Apple and he spent a while in the wilderness, as they say, and then he came back. Well, when he came back to the Apple that John Sculley had been running, Apple had developed all of these different product options, and even around the Mac, you had different memories and different speeds and different monitors and different packages. And so the story goes that, and this is from Isaacson's biography, but the story goes that he sat down at a table with all of these different models and his board of directors, and he said, which one of these would I tell my mother to buy? Because he just couldn't figure out, he knew, obviously, from being very well acquainted with computers, he knew the advantage of A over B and the advantages that C might have, or G might have, or D might have, or F might have. But he couldn't see which one he would recommend. And so you have this whole catalog of options, but it's not easy for your customers.
Yeah. So it's funny. Right before you shared that story, I was going to ask you, why do you think this happens so much? Like, how do you think this pit gets dug of complexity that makes it hard? Like, how do you end up making it hard? Because no one says like, hey, let's make it really hard for people to do what we want them to do.
No,
right?
I'll tell you how it gets hard. It's the way I was brought up. I was brought up in a Jewish home, and it revolves around food. So let's say that stay with me here. I know
everything is just like
food and guilt.
Life.
Yes. So there are. Let's say that you're having 12 people over for some sort of gathering, and you want to have 3 different entrees, because what if somebody doesn't like the steak, or what if somebody doesn't like the fish, or what if somebody doesn't like the chicken? But what if all 12 show up and they all only want chicken? So you've got to buy essentially food for 36 to feed 12. Just in case. Mm-hmm. And what if this group defies the odds and all 12 of them only want chicken and only want the string beans? So God forbid you run out. So
fears multiply.
But I do think it's fear
and guilt. And there's the guilt. Like, I don't want to be the person who didn't have enough food for everybody. So
correct. And so you look at this, and if you're not throwing a dinner party for 12, but instead you're trying to appeal to a marketplace of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever it is, and you think, well, what if they only want A and C? What if they only want B, D, and F? So I'll make a product for that. I'll make a product for A and C, and then those who only want B, D, and F but hate A and C. And then I'll make a product for X, Y, and T, but they hate this other thing. And so in an effort to make it so that each individual within your marketplace finds that custom fit, you make every individual in your marketplace so paralyzed with indecision.
Yeah. Well, so I think it's definitely partly that. I think another thing, a similar kind of thing, also happens with internally, like sort of the internal geeking out. Like if you are, I spend a lot of time in architecture, and, I work with a lot of startups, and when you're in your own thing, you care about your thing more than the outside people do. And you know it more intimately, and you know all the nuances of it, and you get fascinated with the nuances of it. And like, oh, it could have this thing and it could have that thing. And oh my God, it'd be amazing if this happened. And you make all those things. And ultimately the person just needs to type a letter and print. Yeah. And so there's a certain amount of complexity, I think, that can happen from being out of touch with what the end user is actually going to need and want, because you can see these like fascinating possibilities. And not to say that to not do that, because that's where innovation. I mean, there are things that the iPhone does that I never would have said, oh, I need somebody to do that. In fact, in all my brilliance, I remember when Evernote first came out, and I saw it on something and I downloaded it, and I was like, well, this is kind of cool, but I don't get it. I don't need this thing. Now I practically live off of it. So, because at some point it clicked for me and I got it, but it was landing before I really even knew what use I would need for it. So I think some complexity can happen when we're not really taking the time to, what is that quote? No product, was it an Einstein quote? No product survives its first encounter with the market, or something like that.
I know the Mike Tyson quote, which is everybody has a plan until he gets hit in the face. But that's probably not what you were going for.
Not quite what I was going for. No, it could be anyone. I'm the worst with who said what, but it's something like no great idea survives its first
encounter with the market, meaning that you have to have an idea, take it for a spin around the block, see what people like. Sometimes they like what you like, and sometimes they don't. I remember when there was a to-do app that shall not go named. I will not say what it was. And it was very early on. I was a super early adopter. And as such, I actually ended up in conversation with the people quite a lot because I was calling in all the time. So they started coming back to me like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I needed them to do something a little bit differently because I was having some of my clients use it and I wanted to be able to look over their shoulder for what they were doing. And they said, hey, can we talk to you about what your clients are loving about it and why this is the thing that you're trying to use instead of other things? And I had a very clear answer for them for that. And we got on the phone and she said, is it and I can't remember what animal it was. They had some like icon. It was like a beaver or something. I don't remember what it was, but platypus, I don't know. They're like, is it the something, like, because they thought their differentiating factor was that they were like cute and funny and interesting. And I was like, I was so shocked. I was like, you have absolutely no idea what your value is. Like they were one of the first ones to use the natural language. Like you could make the task, you could say, call Eliot at 2:00 tomorrow, and it would put the time 2:00 tomorrow. That to me was invaluable. That saved me like 14 clicks in logging something. They had no idea that was of value. So that checking in with people, and they were sitting in their little room going, ooh, let's put the beaver out in front of everybody.
But I do just have to. I know that wasn't the beaver platypus thing wasn't your major point, but I do remember very early on when I was practicing law with my dad, and this is in the late 80s when people were still using Yellow Pages and Yellow Pages advertising. And there was this representative for Yellow Pages advertising that was sitting in my office and he was trying to sell me on new advertising. And he was telling me what was coming up next year, and he could barely contain his excitement because they had just struck a deal to be able to tie in with the cartoon character Wiley Coyote. And he was so excited that Yellow Pages had we can use Wiley Coyote, we can use that. And he was a nice guy, but completely oblivious to the fact that this had absolutely no value to me whatsoever. Yeah. But he was in love with, and his company by extension was in love with what their little internal victories and their internal things, but he wasn't seeing it through my eyes.
Well, not only that, but that's such a great example using the Yellow Pages. I mean, I still get the Yellow Pages delivered to my house, and
wait, still?
No, they not on purpose. There is some version of the Yellow Pages. Yeah, it lands up on my front porch. I take it out of the plastic bag because you can't recycle the plastic bag, and I stick it in the recycling. And it is hundreds of pages of this. And so to me, it's such a great example, even though it wasn't exactly how you were using it. The Yellow Pages was on a raft that was headed over a waterfall. And so by focusing on Wiley Coyote, it's almost like saying like, hey, we're in this raft, we're drifting down this river and I hear a big roar. I don't know what that is, but hey, look, I got this cool pen. It's just completely, out of touch with where you're headed. And so I think that is another big thing that leads to complexity. And the other thought I had when you were using your first example that I see leading to this unnecessary complexity that gets in the way of people doing what you want them to do is basing rules off of one problem, like global rules off of one instance of a challenge. So I think back to your ticket, and I bet maybe they had a couple problems with checks bouncing, or maybe cash was too hard to track, or I could see some things that led to we'll make it a money order. I have to believe that you were not the only person that they were trying to track down for ages and ages and ages. But so sort of myopically seeing a small problem or an individual problem, strapping a solution on it without thinking of the unintended consequences of that new solution. Like every solution comes with a new set of problems. I feel like I say that 5 times a week.
but that's absolutely true. And it reminds me, I was called into a meeting with the management team of a large construction company, and they were very concerned because they just had a project go south on them. Mm. And if you're in construction long enough, no matter how good you are, you have a project go south. Just things don't work. And so we were talking about that, and the management team was convinced they they called me in because they wanted to redo their contracts to address certain things, and they wanted to hire somebody internally who was going to basically make this problem disappear. And as we were talking, I said, well, you guys have been in business for like 25 years. How often has this happened? And the fact is that this was the first time it had ever happened. And so we started unpacking exactly what it took. It was like the Irish Sweepstakes to make this thing happen. And I get, they're a learning organization, and they should have been conscious of the mistakes. They should make them part of their storytelling and their culture to avoid it. But they were going to hire somebody at $80,000 a year, and they were going to pay me to revamp their contracts and all that to prevent a 1 in a million type repetition of this problem.
Yeah. I see it too at the employee level. And then it takes on a slightly different flavor of what's often avoidance. So that separation of when something needs a policy versus when it's just a conversation that needs to happen. Yeah. So I can't tell you how often I've seen companies who've had no issue with their vacation policy, and you get one guy who's abusing it, and they want to lock down the policy. Mm-hmm. Or they want to make it clear, well, you have to do this and you have to do that. I'm like, well, have you talked to them? No, but we're going to lock this down. So I think some complexity ends up getting filtered in because there's some isolated problem that you think, well, we'll put a rule in place and we'll get around this. But then that rule has to keep going. It's kind of like the tax code, it just keeps getting added to and added to and added to, and it's not necessarily useful.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this a number of times over internet usage. So I'll see a company who has maybe one employee who they notice or they even suspect, let alone notice, is spending too much time on Facebook. So as opposed to addressing it, what they're going to do is they're going to either lock you out of internet, which I've seen cause a problem because there's so many applications in the cloud that you can't get to them. So you can't get to if you're using Salesforce or whatever you're using, you can't get to that. And frankly, the salespeople are doing a lot of research, LinkedIn or online. Or I've had companies go this way too. They not only come out with their policy, but they have their IT guy install spyware on all of the computers. And then they start to get reports on who's doing what on their computers. And then if you get the reports, if you pay the IT guy to put on the spyware and you pay the IT guy to generate the reports, and these reports are being put on your desk, then you have to do something with them. So maybe you make a spreadsheet of these things. And
you hire a person to be the monitor. Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts. And then you realize, you know what? I could have just talked to Diane and told her to watch the Facebook use.
And it's coming back to, and it's kind of the last point here, because I think we could have a whole topic about this, is what kind of company do I want to be? Do I want to have a kind of organization where I have to monitor people? I don't. If that's what it requires, then either I need to look at what kind of people I have, or I need to, if that's just the way it works, maybe I'm in the wrong business, maybe there's something else, but I don't want to have a company where I have to monitor people like that. So, it probably comes back to either Diane just needs a nudge and she'll straighten up, or maybe she's not a good fit. You can solve the problem in that spot versus making it into this huge, here's the pit. This is kind of want to close on this. Often these things that create so much complexity and hassle and challenge in the moment appear to be the easier route. That's what fascinates me. Talking to Diane about Facebook feels awkward, so we'll do it this way.
Right.
And then it creates this entire Pandora's box of activity and work and yucky monitoring and things you don't want to do. And so I think that is the lesson in this topic for me, is that pause and say it feels like the easier thing, but is it really? What does this look like longer term? Or is it easier just to bite the bullet and do this hard conversation now, or deal with this in some other way besides money orders?
Right. So if I tell you that you got the last word by my saying that after you spoke, does that mean I got the last word?
Not if I keep talking.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, There are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.